Hey everybody, welcome to the Otherppl show. I'm Brad Listi. I'm here in Los Angeles. It's nice to be with you. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you're doing all right. It is Friday, so it's time for another flashback episode where I dig into the Otherppl archives and share an outtake from an episode from years past. Today, an outtake from episode 627. My conversation with author and poet Megan Fernandes. It first aired on March 1st, 2020. Megan is the author of several books, including The Kingdom and After, which was published by Tightrope Books in 2015. Another one called Good Boys, that was published by Tin House back in 2020. And most recently, she authored a poetry collection entitled I Do Everything I'm Told. This one is also available from Tin House. It was published to wide acclaim this past summer. Megan's work has appeared all over the place, including the New Yorker magazine, the American Poetry Review, Ploughshares, Guernica, McSweeney's, and elsewhere. She is an associate professor of English and the writer-in-residence at Lafayette College. An outtake from episode 627, my conversation with Megan Fernandes, is coming up momentarily. A quick reminder before we get going that I do a weekly email newsletter over at Substack. You can subscribe for free. It's bradlisti.substack.com, I believe. It's a great way to keep up with the show. I let you know about the latest episodes each week. I also share a list of links to things that I've been reading and finding interesting. So if you would like to hear from me in your inbox once a week, head on over to Substack and subscribe. Likewise, there is a Patreon community for this show. If you're a regular listener, if you really enjoy what I do and you would like to help this program continue into the future, head on over to patreon.com/otherpplpod. Join and get yourself some merchandise in the process. Get yourself a book club subscription. There are options, so check it out over at patreon.com/otherpplpod. Okay, so today's flashback features an outtake from episode 627, my conversation with author and poet Megan Fernandes. Again, it first aired on March 1st, 2020. The full episode, incidentally, is available in the feed, so if you like this flashback and you want to hear the full conversation, you can do that. It's in the feed. It's waiting for you, episode 627. All right? Here I am in conversation back in March of 2020 with Megan Fernandes.
I'm not really
sporty.
I'm at all. Can you tell? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. You're from Edmonton, though. You could be a hockey
I know.
fan.
I do. Yeah, I know who Wayne Gretzky is, and I did go to elementary school with the guy who's the captain or was the captain of the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Oh, really?
Dion Phaneuf or something. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I watched this in a documentary about Wayne Gretzky and how he got traded.
Oh, yeah.
Which was this huge. I mean,
it was huge. Yeah.
It was like the most important thing that ever happened
in Canada.
In Canada.
All of Canada. Yeah. Yeah.
That's the way it was positioned too. But that was like my first real window into life in Edmonton. It's not a place that I have much of. I have no personal experience there on the ground, and then I had.
Why would you? Yeah.
Yeah. So, what do you recall?
Oh, actually, I think I had kind of like a lovely early years in Edmonton. It was cold, but like cold weather for a kid is kind of fun.
Yeah.
A lot of like making snowmen and being outside, a lot of wilderness. And I think that there was a pretty good Indian community around us. So we had like a good community there, and also family. A lot of my family immigrated to that part of Canada. It was easier to immigrate there than the United States at the time.
Oh, okay. So wait, are both your parents from India?
Yeah, it's kind of complicated. They are they're third generation East African Portuguese colonized Indians who grew up under British occupation. So they're from Tanzania, actually, and they lived there for 3 generations, but part of an Indian diaspora.
Got it.
In Tanzania, but part of this Indian diaspora that's from Goa, which is a previously Portuguese colonized smallest province in India. Yeah.
Okay. Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a poet. That makes sense to me now. Like, I was just like, wait, what is this? I remember getting my cable bills in Spanish. I mean, like, I don't speak Spanish. But just being kind of illegible in terms of identity, that's something that I think I've always kind of struggled with. And then, like, the Canadian, add that to the mix, and it was even more confusing, I think.
But your roots, like your ethnic origins, are India?
India, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
You said Goa.
Goa.
Which is?
It's the smallest province in India. It's on the west side of India, and particularly from Panjim, which is a small city in Goa. And yeah, I mean, we still have family that live there. My grandparents were in Mumbai for 40 years, and then they moved to Goa. They've passed now, but we have just family mostly in Mumbai and Goa, left in India. And then in Tanzania, in Tanga, which is a small coastal town.
Have you been to these places?
Yeah, I've been to India a lot. I haven't been there in a little while, but when I was growing up, we would go there, almost every year, or every few years. And then the last time I was in East Africa was in 2015.
Okay, and how's that?
It was really important. It was a really important trip for me. It was the first time I'd been there without my parents, so that was very difficult because they speak Swahili and I do not speak great Swahili.
And they speak Spanish too?
No, that was a joke. We don't speak any Spanish. It's just Fernandes. We get cable bills, in Spanish all the time.
And where does the Fernandes come from?
It's Portuguese. Yeah, Fernandes is a very common Portuguese last name. With an S, right? So with a Z, it's Hispanic, right? But with an S, it's Portuguese.
But the name, was there a name changed to Fernandes from something?
No.
It's always been Fernandes?
Always Fernandes.
Going back to India?
Well, I mean, because there was intermarriage, right?
Okay.
Yeah, back in the day. So De Souza, De Silva, Pereira, Fernandes, these are the common last names you'll find in Goa, India, which are all Portuguese last names. And then, the Portuguese first names are also, the first names of all these, ethnically Indian people are also Portuguese, like Zélia or Evaristo, so it's always been a little bit confusing for somebody outside to explain to them what it's like, yeah.
Okay, and so your parents immigrate to Canada. They leave Tanzania because things are bad in Tanzania?
No, so my mom left Tanzania and went and became a flight attendant for Saudi Arabian Airlines after college in India. She went back to India, went to college. She was actually a molecular biology major, but there were no jobs, and I think it was probably particularly difficult for women to get jobs in the sciences at the time. So she wanted to travel. She became a flight attendant for Saudi Arabia.
By the way, in the age of coronavirus, we need flight attendants with molecular biology degrees.
Oh, God.
This is perfect.
Is it too soon for that joke? I don't know. Or maybe it's not soon enough. I'm terrified. Yeah. I have some contagion fear. But, she had skills for pandemics. And then my dad went to England when he was 17. He left Africa to go to England and then immigrated from England to Canada.
So like citizens of the world.
Basically, yes.
That's cool to me. it
is cool. I mean, that's sort of the philosophy of diaspora, I guess. It's, it means scattered, but I also think I read somewhere that, where you're born, the concept of the nation is based on where you're born, but the concept of diaspora is where you die. And I kind of thought that was, that's a little bit how I think about my family's movements is, sometimes sadly going to funerals in places that feel so far away from where they grew up and where they were sort of formed. And I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah, it's cool because you get to experience all these different places and you have a certain worldliness and sense of connectivity, I would imagine. But then also, in a lot of ways, it can be harder because of that sense of dislocation, that sense of never fully belonging to a place. Or do you have that?
100%. And also this feeling of just consistently feeling authentic in every space, right? Not being kind of feeling like American, but also because that's where I grew up, predominantly, but also growing up in a household where none of my friends, could really relate unless they also were immigrants, right? To the way that I grew up or to my relationship or experiences growing up. But then going to India and also feeling not at all of that world.
Right.
And then, going to, all over. Yeah. So I think it's a consistent feeling of, that what does it mean to have a homeland that's theoretical or imaginary or kind of rootless in a way? And how do you make a space for subjectivity or, I'm an academic, I use these words. How do you make a space for identity? When everything feels more horizontal than deep, if that makes sense.
Do you feel like an American? Like, I say this because, it's nice for me to sometimes think like I'm a citizen of the world. I don't even believe in countries. Patriotism feels weird to me. Like, I get that I'm an American. There are a lot of things I appreciate about the privilege of growing up here. There are a lot of things I don't appreciate exactly. But when I go abroad, there is something sort of like I can never shake the fact that I'm from here.
Yeah.
And I don't think I necessarily realize how deeply I'm an American until I'm not in the United States.
Of course, yeah.
Do you have that feeling when you go abroad, or you're like, actually, I am, this place has gotten into me?
Yeah. Oh, no, I totally identify as an American for all the terrible things about that and all the good things about that, I guess. I mean, I don't have a romanticized idea like you of, like, I think we're similar this way. I don't have any romanticized idea of like patriotism or, belonging to a nation or feeling like that citizenship, means something aspirational, right? I feel like pretty realistic, but, no, I feel like American culturally in terms of like, the music I would listen to, the TV shows I would watch, the way that I talk, I think is very East Coast. My sense of humor feels very East Coast. I'm struggling out here in Southern California.
Come on.
But no, I definitely feel like an American in that way. And I have friends who are from everywhere who are like, oh my God, you're so American sometimes.
Yeah. Like, I mean, I've obviously, it's well documented on this show, but I, like many people, have been out of sorts, for the past few years. Looking at what's going on in the United States, and I don't need to ramble and spell it out in detail, but one of the things that I read recently, which made me pause and made me sort of rethink my thinking, is like, on the one hand, I say, patriotism, especially when it's like jingoistic and,
sure,
tied to like foreign adventures in war or whatever. That's where it starts to give me the creeps. But I read something about people who had immigrated to the United States, like first generation, and specifically they had come from countries that were failed states.
Yeah.
And this was before Trump. And so they were, this might even have been before George W. Bush. But, coming to a country where the government, quasi worked,
right,
and had some level of integrity to it. It was most deeply appreciated, I think, was what this essay was trying to communicate, by people who were coming from countries where the state had completely failed.
Right.
And I think the point was that, like, you don't know how much you appreciate like a semi-functional government until it's gone.
Sure.
So I don't know. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah. I mean, on the other hand, a lot of those semi-functional governments are only semi-functional because of American imperialism and American intervention and, like years and years of colonial occupation and taking resources from certain spaces. So, yeah, I think a lot about the language that we use to think about nation statehood, about modernity, about what it means to be, I'm putting this in air quotes, like a developed country, what it means to have a developing economy, the way that we talk about China and India and certainly parts of Africa now. And yeah, I'm very suspect of the language of what works, right, and what fails, because I think, we're really failing, and we've been failing in a lot of ways, in income inequality, obviously here, in terms of the criminal justice system, in terms of race, we've been failing for so long. So, yeah, what it means to be semi-functional as like a people or as like a government or as a population, I think that language is sort of a language that is really only working for a pretty small population.
Right.
Hence the situation that we're in right now.
Well, the other day, like sometimes I'll read about climate change. I can only do it in fits and starts because it's so scary and depressing.
Of course, yeah.
I read for I got into like a internet hole, and I just read for a couple hours.
Yeah.
I went inside and literally poured myself like a large glass of vodka.
Yeah.
I was so shaken by what I read.
Sure. Where's that vodka, by the way?
Yeah, it's all gone. But that's not necessarily like me. I don't typically have a cocktail. I mean, I'm not get upset and have a cocktail person, but it struck me as a unique situation, and I guess maybe proportionate.
Oh yeah.
And then last night, I don't usually remember my dreams. I had a vivid dream that I was dying. And basically, like, it was like that I was sick and then I was going to be euthanized.
Wow.
And I woke up crying.
Wow.
Not like me at all.
Really?
Yeah.
You're not a crier in the morning?
No. But I was just like, whoa, like it was just such a heavy dream.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I was trying to be like, in the dream, I was trying to sort of be like a stoic dad.
Sure.
But it was like Old Yeller, you know, like I was like, but except I was Old Yeller.
Do you remember your dreams?
No.
Okay.
Not typically.
Yeah.
Or if I do, it's very fleeting and then gone.
Is the symbolism of your dreams like quite cinematic, or is it usually pretty narrative? And
I think it might be tied to like the deep sense of dread and sadness that I felt for my own kids after reading about climate change.
Yes.
Like what we're doing. And you know, we talked about this before we came on. I'm going to try not to timestamp this conversation with specific political stuff, just because by the time it goes live, it could all be,
of course, yeah,
like we could all be dead of coronavirus.
Sure. Right.
But one of the things that I have witnessed online and in conversation with people, but specifically on social media, like the chatter around the election, one component of it that I've noticed is that young people tend to be in support of Bernie.
Yes.
Like that he has young people.
Yeah.
And then there is a certain subset of the American political left which cannot stand Bernie, thinks he's going to lose.
Right.
Thinks that these kids basically are delusional. I hear like there's a lot of shit talking both ways, to be honest. Like
Sure.
the kids shit talk the older people shit talk the younger people. Everybody seems to know that Bernie can win, or everybody seems to know that Bernie cannot win.
Yeah.
And I'm always like, motherfuckers, like look who's in the Oval Office. Nobody fucking knows anything. Like
I'm kind of with you there, yeah.
We all said there was no way Trump was going to be the nominee. He was the nominee. We said there's no way he's going to beat Hillary. Look where we are now.
Yeah.
So don't act like you know.
Right.
Like have some humility.
Of course, and move with the uncertainty of the times.
Yeah.
Right.
And then it's like, well, Bernie has all these pie-in-the-sky plans, and he doesn't have any like specific action plans. He'll never be able to get anything passed. It could be true. It would be incredibly politically difficult for him, if elected, to pass his agenda in full. I think that's a political reality that seems very likely, unless he wins like a supermajority. But here's where the point that I'm getting at is that when I think about younger generations in particular, and when I think about young people who are in their 20s and who are saddled with college debt, who might be young women who would like to have a family, or young men who would like to have a family, even with health insurance, the out-of-pocket copays in hospitals for pregnancy make things too expensive.
Yeah.
Childcare costs make starting a family cost prohibitive. In the meantime, you're saddled with, $120,000 of college debt. That's how you enter the workforce. And then we have a climate disaster that is barreling down, that requires emergency, massive, unprecedented action over the next decade, or we are fucked.
Yeah.
And what I want to say to anybody who poo-poos, I can't believe I just used it as a verb, but anybody,
I'm also surprised, but yeah, go ahead.
Anybody who shit talks young people for responding to the message that Bernie is sending out, listen, I don't know what to think of him.
Right.
I'm not advocating for him. I'm advocating for these kids who want a future.
Yeah.
Like, get a clue.
Yeah.
Like, maybe they are dreamers or whatever. Maybe they are not living in political reality, but how can you fault them? They want a fucking future.
Yeah.
And I just think I don't see the conversation centering on why young people are responding to that message. I see the conversation centering on, you're stupid, you're wrong, he's bad, he's a narcissist, whatever the criticisms might be. I think it's maybe more useful to be like, why are they there? Maybe we should listen to them, and maybe we should consider why they are so immovable. They're that core, like 30% block or whatever. So anyway, that's a long-winded spiel, but I've been thinking about this a lot.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things about Bernie is sort of the conversation that has been kind of irresponsible in my opinion in the media about him as radical. I think a lot of countries in Europe would put like Bernie as like moderate left, just left of moderate. Like, he's not actually asking for anything that's crazy radical, in my opinion. He's asking for things that are like available to most countries that would see themselves as leaders of civilization, and like healthcare, right? Maternity leave, dignity, just like human dignity. So I think that there's this way in which we've couched this conversation in the media nationally really problematically as being, we have to have someone who's moderate, as if that's a reality.
Well, where's the middle? That's what I think that's kind of what you're saying. Like,
what I'm saying is that like we've sort of said, okay, this person is doing well. By we, I mean the media is sort of saying like what he's advocating for is radical. It's not. What he's advocating for is just like decent human living with some dignity, where you don't have to go bankrupt if you get cancer, or where, friends of mine who have had like some serious medical issues, but once they get kicked off their parents' health insurance, right, can't go see a doctor, and then things spiral out of control. Or I mean, the people who are advocating for a kind of moderate option, in my opinion, are just like they are living in an unreality, right? They are living in an unreality where they think that they can go back to some, I don't know, Clinton, Obama era neoliberal fantasy, which is exactly that. That's a fantasy structure that didn't work. It didn't work, and it left so many people out, right?
All right, guys, there we go. That was today's flashback, episode 627, my conversation with author and poet Megan Fernandes. It first aired on March 1st, 2020. The full episode, episode 627, is available in the feed, so if you want to tune in and hear the full conversation, have at it. Megan Fernandes is the author of a poetry collection entitled I Do Everything I'm Told, published earlier this year to great acclaim on Tin House. Go get your copy of that. You can follow her on social media at Twitter and on Instagram. She has a website too. It is meganfernandez.com. So check that out. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen. You can also subscribe on YouTube. Follow the show on social media, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, and Blue Sky. Subscribe to my weekly newsletter over at Substack. You can do that for free. Join the Other People Patreon community at patreon.com/otherpplpod. Help keep this show going into the future. Give this show a rating and write a little review if that's an option. If you have a couple of minutes and you want to help the cause, it helps the show find new listeners. If you would like to get Other People apparel, a t-shirt or a sweatshirt, you can do that at the show's official website, otherppl.com. And if you want to read my latest book, it's called Be Brief and Tell Them Everything. It's a novel available in trade paperback, ebook, and audiobook editions. I narrate the audiobook. So if you want to read my novel, it's called Be Brief and Tell Them Everything. All right, so Sunday, my guest will be Jamie Nakamura Lynn. She has a new memoir out called The Night Parade, available from Mariner Books. It is the official November book club pick. Had a great time talking with Jamie Nakamura Lynn. That is coming up in just a couple of days. Stay tuned.